Hello, my name is Mark Taylor and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast. The place for creative and inspiring learning from around the world. Listen to teachers, parents and mentors share how they are supporting children to live their best authentic life and are proving to be a guiding light to us all. Hello, welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us here today on this bonus episode where we're bringing some more interviews from the Learning on Fire podcast back into this Education on Fire umbrella. It's really important for me that we talk about not just the academic side of things in schools, but also the sorts of learning experiences that people have outside of that through teachers, through mentors, through the things they've been told and the advice they've been given, the resources they've come across. And that was really what I wanted to do with Learning on Fire. And why I think it's important that as we merge these two things, that you get the chance to hear what I've already previously done and also to show you a little bit about how we're going to be moving forward and integrate as part of Education on Fire. So I hope you enjoy this episode. This is Jon Vroman, originally released back in November 2019, and it really just shows how showing up in the world and leading by example just makes such a big difference to everyone in your life. Now, the reason we decided to stop doing Learning on Fire is because we wanted to expand Education on Fire and have this idea of a Patreon community. And the point of that really is the fact that most of us who've got children know that we have things we'd like to impart. We've got skills, we've got experiences that we think are really important to our children, but we also know that don't necessarily want to listen to us. They're on their own journey. They need access to these things in their own time, in their own way. So the idea of the Patreon Education on Fire group of elders that are able to do this is to have interviews, conversations, where we can actually create fantastic content which you can then gift to your children so that they can find these things in their own time when it's important to them, when their journey feels like it's what they need. So do go and check that out. If you go to patreon.com/education on fire, you can find out more about that. That's patreon.com/education on fire. Thanks for listening, and I hope you find this episode as enjoyable as I did. There comes a time in every person's life when you realise it's not about doing what you are told, but doing what you know is right for you. Let us take a journey of learning and discovery with the world's most successful people who are living the life of their dreams, walking through life using their inner wisdom and being of service to others. Forget exams, grades and test scores. What is your purpose? As we let go of what we think should be and learn from our elders to gain knowledge, inspiration and a true sense of who we are. What are your dreams? Does your life have meaning? Are you living a life of significance? Let's talk with today's guest. Hello and welcome as we spend some more time together on the Learning on Fire podcast. Today I'm talking to Jon Vroman. Hi Jon, thanks for joining me and let's explore the journey of who you are.
All right, man. It's good to be here. And the journey of who I am, that should be really simple. We're all such simple people, right? It all started when I was 1 day old. Yeah. Do you want me to take you back through the years a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. Let's just talk a little bit about where you're living now, the kind of things that you're into. I mean, I know as being part of your group in terms of Front Row Dads, but also the Front Row Foundation. Just give people a flavour of the sorts of things that you do in your day-to-day.
Awesome. Well, I usually say that primarily I'm a father and I'm a husband, and I've been married for 11 years. I have two wonderful boys, Tiger and Ocean. They are 10 and 5, and we live in Austin, Texas. And I would say that my week is basically split up into two categories. I have a nonprofit called Front Row Foundation, which helps kids and adults who have a life-threatening illness to go to the live event of their dreams from the front row. And then we have a for-profit business called Front Row Dads, and we help high-performing entrepreneurial dads to be family men with businesses, not businessmen who happen to have families. And that, between all those activities, I feel like I live a very full and exciting life.
How did the foundation come about? I mean, it's such a wonderful thing and such a life-affirming thing for people to hear. How did you get involved in that?
Yeah, the answer is it's not really that dramatic from the standpoint of I didn't have cancer. I didn't know somebody who had cancer. It wasn't that. It was just a calling to want to do something nice for people. That was it. I was involved in communities, and I had coaches that were challenging me to look at different categories of my life, one of which was contribution, and say, how do you feel? And I didn't feel great about the contribution category. I didn't feel like I was really making a difference. I mean, you could argue that I was through my work or whatever it was, but genuinely in my heart, I felt like there was more that I could do, where the type of giving that you like to just do something nice for somebody and don't expect anything in return. There's something really powerful about that, and feeling like you gave without expecting a trade of some type. And, the trade, if there was one, was that you'll probably feel really good in your heart. And you know that if you do the right type of giving, that is what you'll receive. And there is a gift there. But that's really where it started. And, the journey to get to like what kind of charity, or how did we choose Front Row Foundation? That's a longer story, which we can explore if you want. But basically, it's a story of values. What do you care about? What are you good at? What problem would you like to solve? Who do you want to help? And then ultimately for us, it was, we wanted to help people who are facing, a life-threatening situation, to have an experience that would help them to feel celebrated, help them come alive, and feel like they could maybe bring a little light to some of their dark moments in life.
I mean, one of the things that always strikes me from the things I listen to you and watch you doing is the fact that you have these ideas, as you sort of explained there, in terms of pillars, areas of your life that you focus on really sort of clearly and with real intention. Is that something you learned? Is it something that you suddenly understood at a certain age? Because I think it just gives so much clarity to how you want to live your life. And I think as teenagers, and especially lots of us as we're growing up, and certainly as a parent trying to support my kids as we go through in terms of get off the phone, go out and do something and all of that. And it's not that they do that all the time, but when I sort of have those things myself, thinking, I just want to be able to inspire them to think of other people, or to do something for someone else just because they want to, not because they're being told. It just sounds like you've got that kind of understood and are able to act on it.
If you talk to my parents about my life when I was a teenager, they would probably start crying because of the pain that I put them through, because of how I was acting and my behaviors. It was that story of my life is actually quite important to the story of my life now, as is with most of us. But so let me tell you what I think is relevant to what you're getting at, which is that when I was 16, I was shy of 5 feet tall and weighed less than 100 pounds. And I was driving a car and I looked like a 9-year-old. I went to an endocrinologist who did a bone scan and determined that at 15, I did have the bone age of a 9-year-old. I ended up getting some human growth hormone shots, which triggered my growth. But those years where I was very, very short, I had developed a mindset, being a victim, developed a mindset of, it was my story. If I could just be taller, I would be better, right? And then when I became taller, and I probably realized that wasn't going to solve all my problems, and that what I was chasing was significance. I was chasing being important, people telling me I was great. I craved that attention, right? And so what I did is I did anything to get it. And I learned from Tony Robbins years ago when I was going through a lot of his training courses. He said something really brilliant, which was that we'll often compromise our values to meet our needs. And I had a need for significance and connection, and I compromised my values of like how to treat people well so that I could get attention. I would act out. I was in this one place of life. I was skipping school. I was drinking heavily. I was acting like a jerk on many, many levels. And I'm saddened when I think about that and the pain that I caused my mom and my dad and all the people that loved and cared about me and wanted to see me excel. But I was in a lot of pain, in my life. And then what happened when I was about 18, I found a company that it was supposed to be a part-time job. And you may have heard of them. A lot of people have. They sell Cutco Knives. So it's a kitchen cutlery company. And they do it in people's homes. They schedule appointments. You go in, you pitch the knives, you sell them, and you try to get referrals to their neighbors or friends and family, et cetera. And that's how the business works. I interviewed with them when I was 18 and got the job. Now, here's what was cool. What was cool is that because it's a sales organization, and like many sales organizations, they have kind of weekly meetings where they try to excite everybody. But they were teaching really good skills, how to manage your mindset, how to, right? So I started getting exposed at that age. So to answer your question, and I know it took a little bit longer of a way to get there, but I was a total disaster. But because I got around the right people, because they gave me the right frameworks, it got me thinking about those things, gave me new tools. I said, oh, there's a different way to live. Oh, there's a different way to think about things. I never knew that. I got excited about it. That idea of taking control of your life, at least the things that you can control, right? Like your reactions and your behaviors and your habits and all of that. And then I just went on a path. I went on a war path of like, I invested in conferences and books, and I just hired coaches, and I fell in love with personal growth. The act of being personally responsible for the way I show up in the world really excited me.
I love that. And I love the fact that you're sort of 18 years old at that kind of stage, because the one thing I struggle with on a fairly regular basis, especially as I'm sort of going through the podcast and chatting to people, is the fact that when I look back to my sort of teenage self, it's that kind of, would I take the sorts of advice that is so valuable from people that I'm chatting to as a teenager, you know? And what I loved about what I heard there is the fact that you were suddenly in this community of people, albeit within a job, that was showing you these ways forward, and it spoke to you, and you took action, and it did make a big difference to your life. So I'm thinking that actually it's somewhere along the line, if it's going to speak to you, it's not necessarily just an age position, it's actually where your mindset is and where you feel like you can actually make a difference.
I think you have to be ready for the upgrade. Right? Like I think the hardware has to be ready for the new software. And what's interesting is it's literally like if I have an old iPad, my dog's saying hi there. If you have an old iPad, right? And then they come out with a new operating system and they say to you, hey, you can't upgrade your iPad because it's not ready for it. It doesn't have what it needs to in order to be upgraded. So a lot of times the information's there, the upgrade's available, the information, the questions, the ideas, the frameworks, it's all there. We just have to be ready for it, right? We have to be in a place where we are prepared to accept that wisdom. And sometimes that's just luck. And sometimes, it comes our way, it hits us over the head. And sometimes we have to go chase it. But either way, I think it's a meeting of both willingness and opportunity.
And I think one thing that reminds me of is sometimes you sort of think, how should I show up in the world? Should I give some advice? Should I just keep myself to myself? What should I say to someone who I think needs a bit of help, but are they actually going to listen to me? And the best piece of advice I was ever given was just whatever you think is best is the right thing. And sometimes that might be different on one day than it is on the next day, because you don't know how that person's going to be. So does it feel like you need to say something? Yes. Do you just need to listen? Is it important that you give them this book because it's made a difference in your life?
Yeah.
And it just is. All you can do is just do that, and then the rest of it you let be, and it will be whatever it happens to be for that other person.
Yeah, years ago there was would your listeners, the Columbine shooting, would that be something they'd be familiar with here in the US that happened, where the kids went into the school and shot a bunch of, do you know about this?
Yeah, do carry on.
Okay. Yeah, well, anyway, this happened years ago. A couple of kids, it was a mass shooting, and it was horrible and horrific. And it was a big topic of conversation. People were talking about this, of course, as they should have been. And I remember watching David Letterman, and there was Marilyn Manson, the rocker Marilyn Manson was on the show and being interviewed. And I'll never forget, at least this is the story I remember about it. I actually want to go back and watch the interview, because I think we tell our stories and they change over the years. But what I remember, and here's what I learned. David Letterman said, if you could talk to those kids before they went into that school and started shooting everybody, what would you have said to them? And it kind of goes back to that advice question. Like, if you could give advice to your younger self, if you could give advice to a young person, if you could give advice to somebody before they made that decision. And he said something that was so smart. He said, I wouldn't have said anything. He said that the problem, that's the problem. He says, I would have asked them questions and listened. Right. And I think that there was a lot of brilliance in that, of saying, in those situations where a lot of times in life, people are like, here's what you need to know. Here, I need to tell you this, versus asking questions and allowing for people to be heard and seen and witnessed, and right. And to be compassionate with them, and then to celebrate them and to challenge them with the additional questions and more listening. That is the hardest thing. Right. In our dad's group, we talk about oftentimes that giving people, we want to solve problems. You always hear people talk about men, especially entrepreneurial men, trying to solve problems for their wives. And it creates all this conflict in the marriage, because like, she doesn't want you to solve the problem. She just wants you to be compassionate and to hear what she's saying, and to feel her, not fix her. Right. I think that's a big thing. I was going somewhere with that, but I don't even remember where I was going. There was a point to that. There's a point to all that, but it's just about listening. And I said, listen, if you want to help, which is what guys do when they start giving advice, I go, help is listening. You are giving her the gift of your attention. You are solving a problem that she's having by not being heard, by listening well. And I think that that's a big part of being a great parent, being a great friend, being a great spouse. More listening, less advice giving, less talking. Right? Less, here's what you should do. And if you do, it's, hey, I remember feeling what I think you're expressing. I remember feeling that way. And here's what I did, or here's what I experienced. And just sharing a story like that can also go a long way.
I think that's really true. And I do have to remind myself of that sometimes. You sort of think, well, my kids must know all these things that happened to me because I know them so intimately, because of course it's my history. And I think, but actually, have I actually shared that? Did they actually know that took place? And more often than not, they didn't, because you have these conversations in your head, but you don't necessarily verbalize it. And I love that idea of being able to, ask questions that are relevant to them at the time, and then how that interweaves into your experience and that shared experience then.
Yeah.
So you've talked, well, we've very clearly heard how your life is different now from when you were growing up, from, like I say, from a physical point of view, and also from obviously an emotional and a mental point of view. But just going back into your school experience, what do you think was valuable about it? Because I know lots of people, and I've heard you talk about it, whether you homeschool, whether you go into private school, whether you're in state school, all those sorts of things. But what did you find valuable about your own school experience? And there's probably some teachers in there that you remember and usually had a big impact as well.
Yeah, I did. But not as many as I would think. It's interesting. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, gosh, I really don't remember a lot of my teachers or the impact they made on my life. And that has more to do with me than them. I truly believe, of where I was at that time and how I showed up, because, I think teachers are, oftentimes the game changer in a child or young adult's life. But my experience was this. I grew up in a military family. My dad was Navy. And so we moved quite a bit. It was sometimes, it would be 2 years and we're out. Sometimes it was 4 years and we're out and into a new school. What my experience with school was that there's a couple of things. One, I appreciated new schools because I could reinvent myself. That was important. I didn't like school because I'm not the type of person who did well in a traditional school environment. I'm not the type of person who wants to sit for long periods of time and then memorize and repeat facts. Right? I'm not that person. And that's clearly demonstrated by how I've chosen to live the last, 20 some years of my life. Right? But I think that was really painful for me. So for me, school was quite painful. There were things I have very fond memories of, like photography class. I really fell in love with photography, and art classes where I'd found out that I had a knack for drawing. There were teachers that I remember along the way. Even as young as, fourth grade, I was in a charter school in South Carolina, and my teacher, I recall him very, very well. And I recall his energy. I recall his calm, patient energy. I think I appreciated the teachers that saw the best in me. Right. And I think that's a challenge with the grading system, is like, here's some stuff. We're going to standardize everything. You over there, you're okay. You're valuable. And you over here, not so much. Right. So I really feel that the best teachers and the experiences that I had in school were the ones where teachers reminded me that my gifts to the world are ones where I can use my strengths in order to make a difference. And I did have those people, which I thought were really wonderful teachers. So my schooling was very interesting because in my sophomore year, when I was 16, I got straight A's. My dad said, if you get straight A's, I'll buy you a car. Well, then he bought me a car and I got these human growth hormone shots. And all of a sudden, like the next year, I was failing out of school, skipping school, drinking during school. So I had quite a variety of experiences during that time. But what I remember and what I appreciate is that when you have people around you that love and care about you, that's a good thing. It doesn't always feel that way at the time. Like as an example, when I was in my senior year, I drew a picture of, it was kind of a dramatic picture of a person shooting themselves. Like, I was very sad. I was very depressed. I drew this picture of this person shooting themselves, and they called me down to the principal and talked to me about, brought in a psychologist to talk to me. And at the time I was like, these guys don't get it. Like, I'm just drawing a picture, like, they're idiots. I'm fine. Now looking back, it's like, yeah, they just recognized that I had a lot of pain, and they were trying to be caring for me in those places. That's what I really remember about my school time is people that saw the best of me.
As we know now, even being in with, like, say, a group of dads, it's that kind of, it's actually relating on whatever level that happens to be. And I think you're right. It's a theme that comes back time and time again about the teacher being the person that saw me. It was the person that understood me, not the person that got me from a D to a C or a B to an A. That never comes up. Never comes up.
I even think that way about my best friend, like John Kane, one of my best friends, my best friend, like the best friend. Like, he is a guy that I felt for the first time in my life when I was in my mid-20s. He was my boss, but he had this ability to sort of see the good in me, right? And say, hey, look, you're not perfect in every area. That's cool. But here's where you're really good. Here's where you shine. Let's ride that wave. And man, he is, to this day, we're best of friends. And it's been a 20-year relationship that's been building, but mostly in seeing the good in each other.
I love that. And I had a conversation with my daughter the other day, and we were talking about subjects because she's got to choose some electives this year in terms of what she's going to study for her main exams and college and what am I going to do for this and whatever. And I said, just wind it back. It's just kind of, what is it about life that you love? And she's like, well, I really like being around people. I like having fun. I couldn't be doing something on my own. I couldn't do this. And I said, and what sort of things do you enjoy doing? I don't like writing loads of things, but I really like the creative side of photography. Like you said, is something that she loves doing as well. And I said, can you see that all of a sudden there's a picture there of the sort of thing that you want your life to look like? It doesn't have to be that I want to get this grade to get into this college, or I want to take this course to do that, because that's going to change all the time. But actually, you've got a really great understanding of who you are, the sorts of people you want to put yourself around, and who can encourage you to be yourself. And from there, you really are in a really strong position, I think, just to allow life to unfold and just follow with it with great instincts, rather than just trying to plan these things out in a very mental kind of way.
That's absolutely right.
Who did you admire when you were young, and what was it about that person that had such an impact on you?
A bunch of people just popped into my head as you asked that. It's interesting. Here's what's crazy about witnessing my own reaction to that question. Like, I'm actually shocked at the name that just popped into my head. It was a guy when I was probably 12. I was taking martial arts, a style of martial arts called Kung Nu. It was a Vietnamese style. I took it on a military base with my dad. And one of the senseis, his name was Jay. And I'll never forget Jay. I don't know what it was. I thought he was cool. But he like made me want to be better. The interesting thing is, I don't know why he's the first guy that just popped into my mind. I don't talk about Jay often. I didn't write about Jay. I don't have any communication with Jay. I couldn't even really tell you what it was about Jay, but there was something about that. Now, here's what I find interesting about that comment. Sometimes the people that are very influential in our lives are the least suspecting ones, the ones that, it's like, really? That's the guy? So I tell a story in my speeches about a time when I was in New Jersey where we used to live, and I was with my son who was 4 or 5 at the time, and we were at a park, and they had set up a rock wall that you could pay to climb. Well, my son wanted to climb, and I was trying to talk him out of it because I thought it was too expensive, and I thought he was too small and he wasn't going to be able to do it. But he was persistent, and finally I was like, all right, let's go give it a shot. I didn't believe at all that he could climb this wall, but he put on the harness and went like 35 feet up on the wall. And I'm standing there in amazement saying, holy crap, like, look at this kid. That's amazing. Totally blown away. Now, he gets to the part of the wall where he's stuck. It's too difficult. So he looks down to me and he's like, Papa. He goes, I can't. And I shout back up to him what I thought was a great fatherly comment. I said, it's all right, buddy. You tried, right? Like, hey, I'm really proud of you for trying. And I thought that's a great comment. But I realized that comment was filled with doubt in his ability. It was almost like I said, yep, I knew it, buddy. I knew you weren't going to do it. Come on back down. You gave it one try. But there was a guy who was working at that rock wall, and he believed that my son could do it. He saw something else. So in that moment, this total stranger to my son and to me just shouted up to my son. He says, hey, little man, try again. Brilliant advice, right? Like, I'm sitting there going, I'm the worst dad in the world.
We've all been there.
My son, with this vote of confidence, right? This new challenge, this new question, this new possibility in his life from a total stranger, grabs a hold of the rock wall and makes it to the very top. Now, could that have been a defining moment of his life? Could that have been an anchor that was made about his ability to seek the top of to reach the top of the mountain, to keep going, to try again? Could that have been programming in that moment, right? And I believe the answer is yes. So here's what's crazy about the story. The crazy about the story is a couple years later, we moved to Austin, Texas. My son wants to climb and becomes like a very good climber, like a competitive climber. Now, I couldn't help but think back to that man's moment where he challenged my son to go for it. And I thought he could have very easily been that one word, that one vote, that one belief in my son that he needed in order to succeed and in order to believe in himself and then pursue that path. Now, I also, the final part of this is that I couldn't help but wonder, why did I do that? I'm his dad. I'm a motivational speaker. I'm a coach. I've run ultra marathons. I believe in human potential, right? So there's this part of me that's going, how did I miss that? And then I realized that oftentimes what we do when we're really close to somebody is we'll treat them like we remember them yesterday, not as who they've become today or could become in any one given moment. Now, not only did I realize that I could do that to my son, I could do that to anybody on my team, I could do that to my wife, I could do that to anybody, but I also realized that I do that to myself. I realized that I see myself like I was yesterday. I see myself as my story, right? See, the danger is to see yourself as your story, especially if it's not an empowering one. And so that became a very important lesson to me about people in my life that were very influential and how they could show up at the weirdest times, like that guy, Jay. I go, I don't even know why I have such an affection for him, but there's people like that in my life that I think just inspired me somehow, and I really appreciate them.
And let's just dive slightly more into what you said there in terms of the story thing's massive. I mean, I think we could all identify with that. I'm the person who is this, or I'm the person who isn't that. Yeah. But, you've already talked about, having your sort of younger days and how your life changed during your teenage years and then moved on. And now you're talking about being a father. But, that story is always still relevant, isn't it? How does the story change? It's not necessarily a kind of my story was this and now it's this and forever on. It's kind of, what am I saying about myself today? And do I want that to still be the same tomorrow? Or how do I change it? It's an ongoing conversation. Is that right, really?
Yeah. I mean, I used to tell myself that the reason that I wasn't further along was because I got off to a slow start. That was the story that held me back. Right. So the reason I'm not further along is because I had this bad attitude, or I was short, or whatever. I wasn't, I didn't have this. Therefore, I don't have this now. Then the story became, man, my past gave me strength. My past gave me perspective, and that pain becomes your purpose. So now my deepest pain in life was not feeling witnessed, seen, heard. And it's not because I didn't have great parents. I had wonderful parents, but it's just, right, we can just have beliefs, right? So that was my belief. Now my role in life is to make people feel witnessed, to empower them to show up. Right. I still struggle with it. Like, I went to a festival with my wife the other night. If anybody follows me on social, by the way, you'll see these pictures of me and my wife, and she's all got glitter on, and she looks hot. She looks really good. And we're at this festival, and she's dancing like nobody's watching. Right. She just dances super free. I mean, it's one of the things I love about her. And I'm standing there with my hands in my pocket, and I'm like, I cannot move. I can't get myself to dance. I can't get myself to move. And it's because the reality is, because I care about what people think about me. And I feel like if I dance, people are going to be laughing at me or joking, whatever. And it's like, I intellectually understand that that's not true per se, right? That people don't care about you as much as you think they do in those environments, right? It's like, they're just going to be like, look at that guy having a great time. Like, but I still wrestle with this. I still wrestle with limiting beliefs, old stories, right? But your pain becomes your purpose, and that's what what happened with me, and I think that's what happens with a lot of people.
I love that, and I think just understanding that we're all just constantly on that treadmill, and I think, like, say, that intellectual idea against the reality and the emotional side of it, and all of that jumbled up together, it just is what it is. And I think once you identify that's what it is, it kind of frees you then, because I think you could always talk yourself into that letting go, can't you? It's like, oh, I've got it again, I'm here again, a little slap around the back of the head, right, now I'm going to dance, or whatever the situation happens to be. But like I say, it does take you on that journey. What was the best piece of advice you've ever been given, and who gave it to you?
Man, I think there's advice that there's advice. I don't know who to credit for this, but I heard somebody say there's just in time advice and there's just in case advice, right? So just in case, it's good to know this, but there's time when somebody gives you advice and you're ready for it. And it was just at the right time that they gave you that advice. I think that when I look back over my life, it's so difficult to think about the best advice, right? It's very difficult to think about one moment because there's so many moments. They all blend together like a book, like every word of a book, right? To create the chapters, to create the storyline. What I think is that if I had to pick one, if I had to, because I can, right? We can all just choose. And if I had to think of the best advice, and we'll call it being channeled, right? Because I don't know who to credit. Sometimes we actually say things like we thought of them and they're our own, but we actually heard somebody else say them, but we don't remember it, right? So I likely heard this from somebody. And actually, you know what? I do remember where I heard this. I'll credit the guy that I heard it from first, and I'll tell you how I recreated it. Jamie Clark, he was a professional speaker, mountain climber, really, really good speaker. And I remember when he said, when your why is strong enough, your how reveals itself. When your why is strong enough, your how reveals itself. That, to me, I thought was some of the most empowering wisdom on the planet, because it talks about finding purpose. And when you find purpose, you find power. I translated that because I remember back in 2005 running my first ultra marathon. I turned it into, when your why has heart, your how gets legs. Because we were attempting to do this 52-mile marathon without any training, basically. And I knew that the thing that was going to get us through was heart, was going to be in my mind, not my conditioning of my body. It was going to be in my mind. So I had to think about, I needed a big purpose. But I oftentimes think that's the way everything is, right? Like, we were having a conversation this morning with the Front Row Foundation staff, and we were stuck on this debate that we were having about how to do this thing. And I just paused and said, time out, guys. Let's talk about, why do we exist as a charity? Let's go back to, what is our purpose? Why are we here? Why does this work matter? We got clear about that. We had conversation. I said, now with that clarity, What's the right decision? And it was instant. We knew exactly what to do when we had clarity about why we existed, right? So you don't, like, people often ask me, like, how do you start a charity? I want to start a charity. I go, don't worry about how to start a charity. Starting a charity is actually easy, right? You file some paperwork with the government and you're a charity. Now, running a charity, that's a whole other question, right? Raising money, running the charity, staff, taxes, all that stuff, or finances, bookkeeping, all that. That's the big stuff. But man, when you want something and you've got, like, man, I know why I must do that, right? Why I must do that today. Right? What's the cost of not doing it? What's the benefit of doing it? Why does this matter? Why are we the ones to do it? Then we find out how. So I think that's the best advice, because it connects you to your purpose before your next step.
Yeah, and just having that as a place to even contemplate before you even start your day or before you come against anything. And I love that way of actually that clarity in order for you to be able to move on in anything that you're doing, I think is such a valuable thing. What does your future look like? And I really like this question because it means something different to so many different people. So I'm really interested knowing a bit of your background about where you're going to take this.
Man, here's what I believe about the future. I actually really believe in the power of looking out into the future. I talk about hope a lot in the charity and in the business, and it's written in the Front Row Factor book, a lot about hope. And hope isn't this weak word. I've seen hope motivate people to get out of wheelchairs and to lead epic lives, right? I've seen hope for the future drive power in the present moment. That's where hope is at its best. Hope is very different than what people call wishful thinking. I wish things were different. That's not what we're talking about. That's not true hope. Hope is deep inside your heart, that when you are hopeful for something, you are willing to take action on it to make it come true. I have a hope that our planet pulls together, a deep hope that our planet pulls together in order to save itself. The reason I say hope, and people will challenge me on this, I know that I'll ruffle some feathers with this. The reason I say hope is that, look, I believe in hope because I think hope gives me a reason to take action. I believe action has to happen. I don't think you can just hope. Hope isn't enough, right? Hope isn't a good plan. I've heard people say that, and I agree 100%. Hope's not the total plan. But hope is a part of the plan, right? So I think we need that. I think we must look into the future. I just realized that if I look back, I suck at predicting the future. I mean, if I go back 10 years ago and could I have predicted everything about, like, exactly where I'm going to be? It's like, no, I wouldn't even be living in this. I'm not in the same city. Austin, Texas wasn't even on my radar 10 years ago, right? 20 years ago, I probably didn't even know Austin, Texas was even an option, right? So I hesitate sometimes getting too far out with details, but what I do get excited about is values. What I do believe about the future, what I believe the future holds, is an evolution of my values, a clarity on my conscience of who I am and what I'm here to do. That's what I'm excited about. That's what I see for my future, is hopefully a guy, and I believe we're gifted days. I don't believe that you do anything to earn this. I mean, look, you put on your seatbelt, good for you, right? If you're in a car accident, you got a better chance of making it. But if it's your time, it's your time. Right? I mean, literally, you could do everything right. And if it's just time, it's time. That's it. It could just, I remember hearing a story about a guy who was this incredibly accomplished, Navy SEAL. He was this war hero, if you will, right? Tough as nails, right? Could do anything. Ironman triathlete. And he's sitting at his car at a traffic light with his seatbelt on. Drunk driver crosses the median, hits him, kills him. That's it. So I think what we need to be doing is we need to be looking into the future, but recognizing that we're not going to be able to control most of what happens. But what we can do is we can think and be inspired about who we'd like to become and what our possible impact could be, and how might we get there, right? And then reel it back into this present moment and go kick ass today in the best way that you can. That's what I think.
I love that. And I think it really is that. I think the most important thing there is, like I say, the hope and the action, and how those two combine and how they play with each other, and then just enjoy the ride and like I say, put that with your true self and how it all comes together, and then what a great life to be able to live.
Yeah.
So this final question, and I can imagine this isn't going to be an either or. It may be an area that you want to discuss. But what podcast, book, video, film, song, or any resource has had the biggest impact on your life, and why was that?
So I've got I can give you what I get this question, and I've got my answer. I know what the book is, and it's not what most people think. The book is called Ultra Marathon Man by Dean Karnazes. And this is the book I read back in 2005 that really challenged me to do more with what I had, to think bigger, right? Believe in myself at a deeper level. I think that book it arrived at the right time. It was the right words on the pages that really got me inspired. So that book to me, I think, is excellent. And I could give you a bunch of books that I think are really, really, really fantastic. Of course, we all could. Like, one of my best friends wrote The Miracle Morning, which is changing lives all over the world, right? So there's all these books that are truly amazing. But I think some of the ones are the ones that just hit you at the right time. And I think it's a great book. Dean ran these incredible distances, and it was just how he turned his life around. And he said, you know what? No more mediocrity. I'm going to find out what I'm made of. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to find out what I'm made of, right? That was cool.
Yeah. I really just love that idea that, like, the theme that's come through this whole conversation is about things happening at the right time, and that play between the action and the wanting to make a difference, and actually it being the right time for that to be the case. And like you say,
you're right.
These books or the song or the podcast, and I know that's happened to me many times, I didn't even go looking for it, but it suddenly hit me, and I looked at it or heard it, and I thought, yeah, of course it is. And that wouldn't have been the same the day before, or maybe even the day after, but it just did it that time. And yeah.
And props to you, by the way, for recognizing the pattern. That really says a lot about your listening and your ability to connect the dots. So bravo.
Oh, thank you. So, I mean, you've got such an incredible life, and you've got so many things, and you're so inspirational in so many different ways in terms of really bringing hope to people. But I think just sharing that positivity and your insights and your understanding, that just sort of brings that community together under that umbrella. So where can people find out more about you and all those things that you've been talking about?
The main website for everything is frontrowfactor.com. You can find out about the charity and the dad's group and all that stuff. If you're a dad out there listening and you want to get connected to an awesome group of men who are, doing great things and wanting to be family men with businesses, not businessmen with families, just go straight to frontrowdads.com. And and I think that those places will get you to where you need to be.
I don't know where you came up with that particular strap line, but I think it's absolutely brilliant, and it just literally laser clear focus on exactly what it's about. And I congratulate you on not only coming up with that, but actually creating the reality of that in this world, because it's absolutely brilliant. So, well,
can I tell you something? I know we're wrapping here, but
sure.
Because you mentioned it, I've got to say why that came up. And it's because I was failing as a dad, right? I started Front Row Dads not because I was crushing it and wanted to tell everybody how to be awesome like me. It was because I was getting crushed and wanted help. And so I said, let me get a group of guys together and figure out some of this stuff, right? So what happened was I was at a party and somebody had asked what I do. And I knew what they were saying professionally, what do you do? And I was answering, I'm a speaker, I'm a writer, I'm a whatever. But then I cut myself off and I said, I'm a father and a husband. And when I'm not doing that, I happen to do these other things. And the minute I said it, I was like, that felt great. And that also is not true, because I was definitely a businessman who happened to take care of his family when he wasn't too busy. And that sucked to realize that that's what it was. And I had to have a real come to Jesus moment with myself to admit that as much as I thought I was a great dad, I had a lot of room to grow. And the minute that I shifted that, I started looking at things differently. My calendar started to shift. I used to give away my best hours to my work. Now I give my best hours to my kids, right? And so if a calendar is a representation of our values, then I made a nice shift there. And that tagline just represents what I truly wanted to be myself and still am aspiring to be.
And I think if there's anyone out there not quite sure how that fits in, the thing I read that you posted today was imagine yourself in 10 years from now. How old are your kids going to be? And that just hits you between the eyes. It's kind of, what am I wasting today for? Because tomorrow is literally just round the corner.
Yes. Yeah,
fantastic.
Right.
Well, thank you, Jon, for sharing your wisdom and allowing us to learn from your wonderful experiences.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Learning on Fire podcast. For more information, please visit educationonfire.com and follow the links from the homepage. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.